The discovery of tit-for-tat and a cooperative side to human nature has led to another wave of belief that understanding our nature will allow us to build a better society. In the 90s, we seem readier than ever to believe that there are evolutionary roots to social problems, with genes for intelligence, violence, even poverty. But behind the hype, there is some new science. Evolutionary psychology is the search for human universals, adaptations which its supporters claim shape who we are and guide how we behave.
A nice example of a highly specific adaptation that can generate multifarious behavior and vast variety of behavior is male-male competition. That is in male brains simply to do with mating strategies. It's good for males to compete for mates, whereas for females there's not much reason to compete for mates. So there's a divergent psychology between males and females when it comes to competing for mates. But a funny thing happened on the way to mating strategies. It turned out that that divergence was not only to do with how you go for mates, but began to pervade the whole of male and female psychology. So the whole of male psychology is more competitive, more risk-taking than females. So who goes bungee jumping, who becomes President of the United States, who commits more homicides, who are the top scientists and top artists and top poets, who are the child molesters, who are all of the extremes. It's males. And that's to do with this difference between male and female psychology. Now, that's a highly specific adaptation, competitiveness and risk-taking, but it's ended up in enormous differences between male and female behavior and an enormous variety of male behaviors.
They have to be right that the human mind, like human arms and legs and hearts and so on, is a product of natural selection. That's not to say that what we do is genetically determined. It's just simply to say that our capacities, our abilities are determined by evolution in just the same way that other features are. As yet, I think they have limited, really dramatic successes. It's difficult for them to point to quite specific things about human beings that they can explain and nobody else can.
Although early days, evolutionary psychologists believe this is the way forward.
It's the place where we're going to find out the truth about human nature, and that is going to inform every policy, every legal document, all the social sciences once it gets off the ground.
I think, in fact, the latest wave, which I think of a sort of son of sociobiology, the recent evolutionary psychology kind of work, is a great advance on the other one in the sense that it is done by people who know some classical psychology and sociology and so on. They're not just ignorant of the background. They just think in places it's mistaken.
Implicitly, there have been many, many systems of thought that have a view of human nature. Most of them have been utterly wrong.
The scientific claims of evolutionary psychology have already been taken up by political thinkers.
Well, I was very interested by the parallels between economics and evolution, between the emphasis on individual competition and how to get a cooperative whole out of the sum of competitive parts, which is a theme common to both economics and evolution. If you look around the world, you see an awful lot more cooperation going on, both in the animal kingdom and in the human behavior, than the sort of nature red in tooth and claw idea would suggest.
For Ridley, the cooperative side of human nature is just the starting point for arguing for a whole series of conjectured human instincts.
If you've got cooperation going within your society, then it's important to be able to defend that cooperation against being exploited by people from outside. People coming in and taking the benefit without paying the cost. Well, it's my belief, and that of a number of other people, that it is relevant that other animals show xenophobia, that is, antagonism between groups, and it's no surprise to find that human beings also show this behavior. This implies that in some sense xenophobia is natural or instinctive in us. Now, that's not to justify it for a moment. It's simply to say, you know, watch out, there is a possibility of eliciting this sort of behavior in human beings if we don't structure society right. Nonetheless, human beings have managed, despite this, in some sense, natural antagonism between groups, have managed also to invent cooperation between groups, which they call trade. And I believe trade is a much more ancient and inherent, as it were, feature of human society than is sometimes thought. I think it's been going on so long that it has built some instinctive mechanisms into our minds.
For Ridley, cooperation led to xenophobia, and xenophobia led to free market economics.
Well, isn't it interesting that just as Darwin in the 1830s develops his theory against a backdrop of laissez-faire, of the workhouses going up, of the weak being sent to the wall, so ultra-Darwinism comes back into vogue in the 1980s, in the Reagan-Thatcher years, years of deregulation, of competitive individualism, of survivalism. It seems to take something from the general culture. It needs a general culture out there as a context to carry it.
I mean, I do think that, to some extent, evolutionary psychology leads you to a view of how human beings behave, which justifies rather more free market, libertarian, laissez-faire view of how to organize society. Generally more humane society than one with order imposed from above.
Evolution has always been political, then and now.
Today, the politics of evolution are more relevant than ever. Behind the genetic arguments over genes for xenophobia, or whether free trade is somehow natural for us, there are larger questions. Questions about our place in nature, and the complex legacy we are leaving our children. Today, ideas discussed in punctuated equilibrium are being taken more seriously. Species don't evolve in isolation. They evolve side by side and affect each other's fate. This is coevolution, a process at the cutting edge of evolutionary thinking.
So picture a frog and a fly, and the frog population is co-evolving with the fly population. And my anecdotal way of saying it is, suppose that the frog develops a sticky tongue. Well, that changes the fitness of the fly, but it also changes the fitness landscape of the fly. It changes what the fly population should do. The fly population, in the face of a frog with sticky tongues, will favor mutations that make the fly slippery, or that make flies have sticky stuff dissolver, or make flies better able to smell sticky-tongued frogs coming at them. So coevolution is a story of the persistent deformation of fitness landscapes in which the frog population is trying to climb via mutations to an adaptive peak in the space of possible frogs, and the flies are trying to climb to an adaptive peak in the space of possible flies. But when the frog moves on its fitness landscape, it changes the locations of the peaks for the flies, and vice versa.
In real ecosystems, not just two, but thousands of different species co-evolve. The dynamics between them may be the key to understanding the evolutionary stability and sudden change of punctuated equilibrium.
So far, in standard evolutionary theory, there's no account for all of that. On the other hand, there's a body of theory that suggests lawful behavior, and the core image is of a sand pile in which one pictures the hand of God dropping sand onto a table.
For Kaufman, the sand pile and the way it changes is an analogy for how ecosystems evolve. The sand falling on the pile represents the evolutionary forces affecting an ecosystem. The sand pile can absorb change, seemingly without effect, until some critical threshold is crossed. And then, like extinctions in an ecosystem, change occurs in avalanches, some small, some catastrophic. Kaufman thinks he may be on the way to working out a law of ecosystem evolution.
The models that several of us are developing